All right, joining us right now is the VC of the Niti Aayog, Dr. Rajiv Kumar. Dr. Kumar, pleasure to talk to you. My first question, and the questions that I'm going to ask you about the monetization pipeline, because this is a complicated subject, the questions will be so that people can understand, because I guess from the government's point of view also, the ultimate objective is to make people understand what the government is trying to do. So the first question is, a lot of people are saying that you're trying to lease something / sell something which is technically not yours. It is built on the taxpayers' money. How would you respond to this?
First clarification, Sanket, is that any apprehension or misinformation about assets being sold should be removed completely, should be eliminated, should be put aside. It's not in the picture. And anybody who says that is simply indulging in misinformation and misleading the people, which is not a good thing to do. So because it's very clear and has been made repeatedly clear that these assets are being leased, and at the end of their contract period, they will be mandatorily handed back to the government. So that's, and I think it's important to emphasize that, because there's a lot of misinformation which is going around on this. On the second question, which is that it's not our assets. Two things here. First, I'm sure that the taxpayer wants to get the best bang out of her money that she pays to the government, and she will never, the taxpayer, the normal taxpayer, will never for a minute support assets built by her tax payments to be used inefficiently or to be wasted or to be value left locked in them and not be used by the public at large. Because these assets, when they're used efficiently, generate growth, they generate employment, they generate the momentum in the economy, which benefits the taxpayer, which is what her real requirement is. That's the most important thing to understand. Second, it is the conventional and traditional theory of government that taxpayers' money is used in trust by the government, but the taxpayer, once having paid the taxes, leaves it with the government and at the government's discretion to use those monies as efficiently and as effectively as possible for public welfare and for improving the lives of the people. So the whole business of government in a democracy or in any other is a social contract between the citizens and the government, that they will use the resources either generated by themselves or by the government in some ways, or pays as tax revenues, are in the custody of the government, and they are handing it over in trust that these will be used efficiently, and therefore this is completely besides the point, that this is not our money. Nothing in the government is ours. Everything is the taxpayers, and we work, and the government works at their behest, as it were. Sure. So therefore, I think this is just it is nitpicking at best, and it is misinformation at worst.
Okay, Dr. Kumar, the next question, which obviously will cross people's mind, the thing with the private sector is, rightfully so, they look at profit generation. It is a part of a business practice. They're supposed to make profits. And if they want to streamline processes, especially in a case where they take a government property on lease, will be to make sure that there is no inefficient working which is happening, which includes an effect on jobs. Usually it is seen that the private sector is lays far more stress on getting people out of the job. I hope what you're saying, you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Thus, the sentiment is that private sector will come and there will be job losses. How do you address this concern?
Yeah, let me address it through an example, Sanket, which is that, let's say there is a proposal for station development through the public-private partnership. Now, all the stations in our country have very large properties, and all these properties are, if you notice, are hugely underutilized. Now, if the private sector person will bring franchisees to the stations, whether these are eateries or these are entertainment places, or these are, bookshops, or, readerships, etc. What all sorts of things. If they bring those franchisees and give them space for generating the revenue and charge the revenue from them as rental, they will generate much more employment than they will be losing out. So it is completely a misunderstanding that the private sector will necessarily destroy jobs. No, the whole idea is that, and that's the whole idea about unlocking value in these places. There are properties, for example, which are totally underutilized, even in our hotel industry, or in warehouses which are derelict, in a derelict condition. Another example, a warehouse built 60, 70 years ago, built in a very different technology, built with different ways, massive underutilization of the space that they've got. Now, in that place, you get a modern warehouse with multiple floors and extra spaces. It will generate more jobs than what it has got today. It will get also forklifts, it will get everything else. So
but
I think
Kumar,
this...
What was stopping the government from doing this, if I may ask?
That's a very separate question, and we'll discuss that some other day about the governance and how that governance can be improved, etc. And it's a completely different question. The government is addressing that as well. We just created the Commission on Capacity Building within the government. Constantly the effort is within NITI Aayog to make the government more accountable, more efficient. We've got the Development Monitoring and Evaluation Office, which now evaluates every scheme, 337 of them, on the basis of its performance. So that's a separate stream of thought, and that will happen. But at the moment, at present, what we've got are underutilized assets, the better utilization of which is bound to generate more jobs, not only in that sector, but multiplier effect down the road, for example, in infrastructure. And we always should look at both direct and indirect job creation, employment creation, when we are discussing these issues.
Sure.
I hope my examples have helped to clear this misunderstanding.
Okay. Dr. Kumar, the next question is about the estimates. The government in its pipeline says that you have an estimate that by 2025 you would be able to raise about 6 lakh crore rupees. That's a huge and a very impressive amount, I must add. But given the state of the economy, what if the private sector is unable to pay that much? Have you factored this condition in? What if they don't match your estimates?
Well, that's a contingency which is always there. But given the buoyancy in our stock markets, given the fact that a startup like Zomato could get 43 times, is it, or 29 times the sort of the IPO amount, and it's got 2 lakh crores sitting in the bank as a premium paid by the investor. I see no reason to be despondent or pessimistic. I think there's a huge amount of liquidity in the world, in the globe today. These assets will also be open for bidding by the foreigners. And I'm very excited by 2 or 3 inquiries already given to us by our ambassadors in other countries, which are saying that sovereign wealth funds in those countries are interested, and pension funds are interested in investing in these assets because they like long-term returns at a steady rate from de-risk projects. And they could just invest in it and hand the management over to the Indians, Indian companies. So given the amount of liquidity that there is in the world today, and nobody can ever deny that, and which is, and I'm sure that these assets will attract a lot of attention, not only from the domestic investors, but also from the foreign investors. So there's no reason to believe that these estimates will not be met. Yes, of course, if there are there are always contingencies which come across, which happen, and that's always, as it were, a caveat which is there in every such proposal that we have.
Now, various sectors, Dr. Kumar, for instance, the aviation sector, we've seen that many airlines went bleeding and then they rushed to the government for support to ask for a bailout package. Do you think, or have you factored this in as far as your planning is concerned, that suppose if these assets are monetized and if the private sector is unable to perform the duty or match the vision that you have of what they will do in terms of efficiency, that you will have to eventually come in and bail them out?
Sanket, each and every model, each and every concessionaire agreement which will be signed between the line ministries who will take up this job and those who are going to bid for it or going to run it will certainly have a clause that if the stipulated conditions are not met, then those assets will have to be returned to the government. Each concessionaire agreement will have specific conditions which will have to be met by the one who by the concessionaire in return, for the revenues that he earns and gives to the government. So it's not a carte blanche that anybody is giving. I mean, these is not even just verbal or theoretical. This will be in black and white in those model agreements, and always the case is that if you don't meet those conditions, for example, if your revenue generation falls short or if your services quality is not up to the mark, etc., then those concessions get annulled and gets back to the government for the government to decide what to do with it.
Dr. Kumar, some of the experts write in newspapers, it's generated a lot of buzz, but some of the experts say, and I find this surprising, this is a write-up in Bloomberg, which says that the sort of bureaucratic and regulatory control that used to exist, that we used to so dread in the Indian system, that, this bureaucratic system has to go. Now there are people who say that the bureaucracy actually worked to an advantage, that nobody could tamper with the systems. And that bureaucratic and regulatory control will in effect go. And this will be detrimental. How would you respond?
Why will that be detrimental? I didn't understand that one. I mean, why would be the removal or the...
Let me give you an example. Let's take the example of, roads. So if someone is going to build a road, operate the road, then what if there is arbitrary pricing as far as toll is concerned, or there is arbitrary pricing in some other sector? How would you control that?
First thing, Sanket, these roads are not going to be built by the private partner, because the assets which are being monetized are already either fully completed or nearing completion.
Sure.
But that's the quality of that asset, because they are completely de-risked from any associated project risk. Second, the price that they'll have to charge, etc., will all be part of the model concessionaire agreement. I mean, nowhere in the world has, has the private partner been allowed to, operate without any caps or limits or constraints.
Sure.
And you have seen that, for example, in the airports which have been privatized, it's not been the case of profiteering at all, because there is the Indian Airports Economic Regulatory Authority, which looks at what you're going to charge, which looks at what the what the tariffs should be, etc., etc. So the entire conversation seems to be quite based on some assumptions that the government is walking away from its duty towards the citizens and towards the public. Not at all. In fact, the idea is, and the whole effort and the objective is to make life better for the citizens. And not to worsen it.
Okay, two quick questions. One question is related to, usually it is seen that when you monetize or privatize, it is with the intent to create a healthy competition where you get in the private sector also, and the government does not do all the business. But there is some criticism that the sort of people who will, or the industries who will be capable to take up an investment as heavy as this, will end up creating a monopoly or a duopoly. Dr. Kumar, don't you think that's a valid concern?
A number of these assets have always been in the nature of local monopolies. I mean, you don't get two highways between point A and B, and hopefully not, the same quality. So, so whether railway stations or, or discoms, and there's a large body of literature on how to handle local monopolies, because this is what they are. They won't be even duopolies. And therefore, that is where government regulation and government's supervision and oversight is important. And I think that is what I said earlier, and I repeat myself, which is that the line ministry, the government will have to ensure that these conditions of, whatever, efficiency, pricing, etc., are there, the part of the concession agreement, and that the concessionaire will have to abide by it.
Okay.
And by the way, there is already a lot of experience in our country about this.
Sure.
So it's not as if we are walking a new, we are going into unknown, uncharted waters.
Now,
the Mumbai-Pune Expressway was monetized very long ago.
Sure.
And the tolls haven't gone through the roof, have they? No. And the traffic has increased.
Sure.
And the quality of the road has been maintained. And I can give you many examples of this kind, whereby this is to show that all these fears and apprehensions are really not based on our real experience in this country.
Dr. Kumar, my final question, and this is about the capability of India Inc. to be actually interested in a proposition like this. There is a Business Standard report which says that India Inc.'s asset turnover ratio dropped to a new low of around 70% in FY21, which is the lowest since financial year 2010. Now, if they're not using their own capacity, their own
Sanket.
Yeah, how would they actually invest?
I read the report this morning,
Yeah.
and this is about manufacturing capacity utilization, and which is very low, and which is a cause of concern, and which requires that the economy starts moving and driving on as many engines as it can, and especially therefore of infrastructure investment. So it's not to do with their capability to run projects or manage projects, etc. And I think I have complete faith, and I know because I've been there, I've worked with the private sector in India, that they have huge amount of abilities and capabilities to manage projects, and that they will not. And again, I repeat, they have shown it in actual practice. There's a track record of private sector managing project infrastructure projects very well. Once they are de-risked, where they get into a problem is when they get into the problem of land acquisition and time overruns and so on. But they have shown the highest level of capability to manage and run these projects, and they will do so in the future.